Workers today must be productive, extremely efficient, and well trained. We work and live in an environment that requires your full attention to what you're doing. Part of these responsibilities is safety. Safety for you and the safety of your coworkers and visitors to your facilities. Reporting to work rested, alert, and ready to perform your job is the first step. Fatigue may affect your ability to work safely. Next, wear appropriate clothing for the job. Follow your company's dress code. If you'll be working in an area with equipment and machinery, don't wear rings and jewelry that can get caught in the moving parts. Keep long hair tied back or under a hat, again to avoid getting caught in machines. Clothing should fit properly, allowing room for movement without being so loose it could get caught in moving parts. Electrical safety is another important safety consideration. Generally, in the workplace, you should always inspect electrical cables, cords, and plugs for frays, cracks, cuts, or defects before you use them. If the electrical tools or equipment you use do not say double insulated on the manufacturer's tag, then they must be grounded with a 3-prong plug and a grounded cable. Always check and test your equipment for safety before you use it. In case of fire, exit the building by appropriate exits. Remain calm and report to your designated area so your supervisor can account for you. In case of earthquake or a tornado, it's best not to go outside. Falling electrical lines, broken glass, or other dangerous conditions could exist outside your building. Experts recommend that you get under a sturdy desk or other heavy object and duck, cover, and hold. Duck under a heavy object for safety. Cover your head with your hands and hold that position until it's safe to move. Housekeeping is checking your work area for materials, cords, cables, or other items that can cause slips, trips, and falls. It's taking the time to make sure your entire area is neat, clean, and organized. Putting tools where they belong when you've finished using them. Housekeeping is your responsibility no matter where you work. Good housekeeping is the first step in fire prevention. If you don't know how to use extinguishers, learn how. It's not as easy as it looks because in case of fire, everyone is under pressure and may panic. This means that unless it's safe to do, don't try to play the hero and try to extinguish a fire that could be hazardous. Your life is more important than property. Accidents are investigated to determine what happened, so precautions and safety standards can be implemented to prevent the same type of accident from repeating. You'd be surprised to learn that 85 to 98% of all accidents and injuries are the result of unsafe acts of people. That's right, unsafe acts of people. People taking shortcuts, not following proper procedures, ignoring safety rules, and just not paying attention. Safety is a job requirement, but more importantly, safety is a moral obligation to yourself, the company, coworkers, and your family. One accident is simply one too many. Thank you.
Your company has the responsibility to identify what PPE can be used to best protect you from the hazards and risks associated with your specific job duties and responsibilities. It may seem simple enough. After all, just about everyone knows about PPE and when and where it should be used. But all too often, they don't. They get busy, they get distracted, or they just do not think an injury like this will happen to them. But make no mistake, the people in these pictures did not think it would happen to them either, and it did. Let's first look at protection for your head. This usually means a hard hat. You will need a hard hat wherever there is a possibility of injury to your head. The head protection that you wear today is designed to protect you from the impact and penetration hazards caused by falling and overhead objects. One solid blow to your head without protection of a hard hat, and you're probably history. Is it worth it? You're required to wear eye protection if your workplace contains a potential hazard that may cause injury to your eyes or face. Protection ranges from basic safety glasses to goggles to full face shields. Hazards such as flying metal chips or chemicals can easily damage your eyes forever. Always wear eye protection when required. If noise in your work area reaches 85 decibels or above, hearing protection is required. This protection is available in two basic forms: earplugs and earmuffs. Putting on earmuffs is pretty simple. If the plugs are the soft disposable type, roll them into a ball. Reach behind your head and pull your ear gently up and back. With your other hand, insert the plug into the ear canal by gently pushing it opposite of the direction you are pulling your ear, down and toward the front of your head. If done properly, you'll achieve a proper fit and effective hearing protection. Without the use of your hands, you're probably out of a job. That's why it makes sense to protect them. Gloves can help prevent cuts, abrasions, burns, and skin contact with chemicals. Selecting the right glove for the right job is the most important thing to remember about protecting your hands. This glove is designed to be resistant to chemicals and will protect your hands from chemical exposure, but it makes a lousy welding glove. This metal mesh glove could prevent or at least reduce the severity of a puncture wound. Do not assume that just any glove will do. If you're unsure about what glove to wear or have any questions about PPE or other safety concerns, stop what you're doing and ask your supervisor. In most industrial environments, foot protection is required. Steel-toed industrial footwear provides puncture protection against sharp hazards such as nails, wire, or scrap metal. They also provide some measure of protection if a heavy item is dropped on your toe. Would you rather have this or this? It is important that all PPE be kept clean and properly maintained. Make sure all of your PPE is cleaned and maintained on a regular basis. If you take care of it, it will take care of you. You should inspect each item of personal protective equipment before use every time. If your equipment is damaged, worn, or otherwise unfit, do not use it. The company can't do it for you. Your supervisors can't do it for you. Your coworkers can't do it for you. Only you can make the decision to protect yourself.
Electricity is used to provide power to a wide variety of machines and equipment. Locking out of electricity prevents electrical equipment from accidental release of electricity during maintenance or repair. Now, before we go much further, let's discuss two categories of employees requiring knowledge and training in lockout-tagout procedures. The first category is authorized employees. These are maintenance personnel who actually use lockout and tagout procedures while they are repairing or maintaining equipment. The second category is affected employees. Now, this describes any employee who uses or works around equipment and machinery. It's recommended that virtually all employees be in the affected employee category. There is one exception to the lockout rule, and that's equipment connected only by an electrical cord and plug. The major requirement of cord and plug connected equipment is that when cleaning, maintenance, or repair of such equipment is being done, the person performing the work must have control of the plug, thus preventing the equipment from becoming re-energized during the servicing operation. How about those routine service operations that maintenance people perform while machinery and equipment are running? Normal production operations means operation of equipment by machine operators. From time to time, minor adjustments are made by machine operators to keep the machine operating properly. The key safety factor in normal productions is machine guarding to protect the machine operator. When employees are protected by machine guarding or similar devices, lockout and tagout is not necessary. If guards or other protection must be removed during this process, the servicing employee could expose hands, fingers, or other body parts to moving machine parts. Lockout-tagout procedures are then necessary. Clearing jams is another area of concern. A good rule of thumb is if an employee will be exposed to possible injury due to unexpected activation, release of energy, or removal of machine guarding, creating potential hazards, then lockout-tagout procedures must be used. Employees must know what tagout means and that they are not to remove tags without authorization. Lockout-tagout hardware may only be used for lockout-tagout and cannot be used for any other purpose. Now, this pertains primarily to the tags because lockout tags used for other purposes may dilute the meaning of the tag.
Little can be more frightening as you plummet to the ground, but it happens more than you can imagine. People endure more than 500,000 falls, 300 deaths, and an average of 165,000 trips to the emergency room every year. Here's the clincher. The vast majority of these cases are a direct result of misuse of the ladder. Wood ladders should be constructed of high-density wood that is free of sharp edges and splinters. Since wood ladders are affected by exposure to heat combined with dampness, they require a dry, well-ventilated storage area. Inspect closely to ensure that the ladder has no defects, irregularities, or weakness. Should you come across a wood ladder that has been painted, do not use it, as paint hides damaged wood. Portable fiberglass and metal ladders must be free of sharp edges and be structurally sound. The ladders must have rungs that are knurled, dimpled, or treated to improve slip resistance. All ladders must be thoroughly inspected prior to use to ensure that they are in good condition and no damage exists. If an inspection reveals damage, the ladder must be repaired or replaced. Under no circumstances should a metal ladder be used near any source of electrical power. Be especially careful when carrying long ladders to ensure that you do not walk into an overhead power line, which could result in your electrocution.
You may recall the old 4-to-1 ratio for setting up straight ladders. To be honest, that's old school safety and falls short of a way to ensure that the ladder is properly set up for safety. First, the top of the ladder must extend 3 feet or 3 rungs above the point of contact to the structure. Secondly, it must be set up at the precise angle of 75.5 degrees to provide the proper angle for climbing.
The feet of a ladder must be level and positioned solidly on the ground. If the ground is soft or uneven, use boards or leg extensions for support. For stability, both sides of a straight ladder need to be against the wall or other support. Keep a 3-point grip on the ladder at all times. This means 2 hands and 1 foot or 1 hand and 2 feet in contact with the ladder. Climb slowly with weight centered between the side rails. Do not lean back, and never stand at or above the top 2 rungs of any ladder. Always remember the belt buckle guide. Never allow your belt buckle or center of your body to extend outside the ladder rails. The surface under the ladder must be both level and firm. Large flat wooden boards placed under the ladder can help level a ladder on uneven ground or provide better footing on soft ground. Keeping tools in a tool belt will keep them handy and free up your hands for climbing. Any heavy or bulky items should be brought up only after you have reached the top. Many of the suggestions for using straight and extension ladders also apply to step ladders. Never use a step ladder in place of a straight ladder. Make sure that your ladder is rated for your weight, including tools and materials. Erect a step ladder only on a flat, level surface. Do not place it on a table or any similar platform for added height. Before climbing a step ladder, make sure that its legs are fully extended and that the spreader is locked. The locking device on some ladders may present a pinching hazard, so keep fingers clear when setting up the ladder. Do not step on the top platform or the top 2 steps or shelf. Ladders are useful equipment, but when a ladder is used improperly, a simple chore can become a trip to the emergency room. Following the safety standards for working with ladders can go a long way to keeping you out of the ER.
Whenever you're working 6 or more feet high, OSHA requires fall protection. Right now, Let's take a quick look at the different types of fall protection. First, there are guardrails, which consist of a top rail, mid-rail, toe boards, and anchoring posts. The guardrail must be strong enough to withstand forces of up to 200 pounds applied within 2 inches of the top edge in any outward or downward position. There are a variety of guardrails such as wood, pipe, steel, cable, and others. Another type of fall protection is safety nets. The third fall protection is a cover. Any opening 2 inches or more in floors or other walking surfaces must be covered. This can be a simple piece of sturdy plywood that will support twice the weight of any worker, equipment, or materials. When placing covers over open holes or gaps, write the word hole or cover in large, easy-to-see letters and make sure the cover is securely in place. Let's take a look at a personal fall arrest system. Generally, it has 5 components: a full body harness, a lanyard, snap hooks, an anchorage point, and the 5th component is knowledge of how the system works and how to take care of the equipment. The full body harness reduces the impact caused by the fall as it spreads pressure evenly over your thighs, chest, shoulders, and pelvis. The person demonstrating the drop test has been properly harnessed and has the lanyard attached to an anchoring device. The person drops from a height, and the harness and lanyard stretch and bring the demonstrator to an effective stop without injury. Now let's review the lanyard. There are different kinds of lanyards, such as nylon, polyester, cable, and rope. Shock-absorbing lanyards and rope grabs are designed to absorb most of the force of a fall. If the lanyard you're using has been subjected to a fall, tag out the lanyard because it can't be used again. If it's been used, the stitching will be torn out. Make sure the lanyard is in good condition, without any defects, tears, or cuts, and the stitching is in place on the tag. Inspect the metal components for signs of corrosion, cracks, sharp edges, or signs of excessive wear. Make sure you know how long your lanyard is when determining how far you will fall before you stop, including the stretch factor of the lanyard and harness. Snap hooks connect the lanyard to your body harness. You should always use the proper snap hooks and D-rings of the same size and made by the same manufacturer, and always double-check the connection to make sure it's properly locked and in good condition. An anchorage point is the place where your lanyard is attached to a solid, unmovable object. Keep in mind that you may weigh only 200 pounds, but once you begin to fall, that 200 pounds can turn into a couple thousand pounds of force. Another factor in fall protection safety is the swing factor. This is a pendulum effect at the end of a fall, which could cause you to hit something if you swing too far. Never anchor the lanyard to a guardrail or similar object. As we discussed earlier, the 5th component of a fall protection system is knowledge. Be sure to know how your equipment works, how to properly inspect all components, and if you find something wrong with your equipment, don't use it. Tag it defective and replace it before you continue. Another important factor in the knowledge component is to never take shortcuts and never fail to use your equipment when you're working at a level 6 feet or higher that requires fall protection. When control lines are used, they must be erected not less than 6 feet but no more than 25 feet from the unprotected or leading edge. There are exceptions to this rule when erecting precast concrete members. If you're using this system, make sure you follow the rules and warnings. Next, a safety monitoring system and competent person is another way to prevent falls. A competent person is one who is capable of identifying existing and predictable workplace hazards in the surrounding or working conditions which are unsanitary, hazardous, or dangerous to employees, and who has the authority to take prompt corrective measures to eliminate them. You must have a competent person designated as a safety monitor, and that person's job is to actively patrol the work area and warn others of any possible danger. This is a full-time job, and the monitor must be able to recognize fall hazards and cannot perform other work duties. The safety monitor is a full-time job while employees are exposed. The employer is required to provide a training program for each employee who might be exposed to fall hazards. Employees must be trained in the correct procedures for the handling and storage of equipment and materials, and the erection of overhead protection, and the role of employees in fall protection plans, and the OSHA standards pertaining to fall protection. Retraining is required when the employer has reason to believe that any affected employee who has already been trained does not have the understanding and skill required. The employer must retrain that employee. In other words, employees must be kept aware of proper fall protection, OSHA standards, fall protection equipment, and everything necessary to prevent falls. If you have any questions, be sure to ask your trainer or supervisor, because your safety is much too important to leave any questions unanswered.
Scaffold means any temporary elevated platform that is supported or suspended, and its supporting structure, including points of anchorage, used for supporting employees or materials or both, meet required OSHA standards for construction and use of scaffolds. Organizations that require employees to use scaffolds must designate a competent person to oversee erecting, securing, and dismantling of scaffolds. The competent person must understand the rules and regulations as they pertain to the scaffold he or she oversees, as well as conduct scaffold inspections and manage daily activities involving scaffold use. It's important not to intermix scaffold components manufactured by different manufacturers, unless the components fit together without force and the scaffold's structural integrity is maintained. Scaffold components manufactured by different manufacturers will not be modified in order to intermix them unless the competent person determines the resulting scaffold is structurally sound. The competent person is responsible for evaluating all direct connections and to confirm, based on that evaluation, that the supporting surfaces are capable of supporting the loads to be imposed before a suspension scaffold may be used. Inspecting all suspension scaffold ropes prior to each work shift and after every occurrence which could affect a rope's integrity. Ropes must meet all serviceability and load requirements. The competent person directs the erection, moving, dismantling, or altering of all scaffolds used by organizations. Qualified person. A qualified person is responsible for the design, construction, and loading of all scaffolds. Capacity. All OSHA rules for scaffolds must be followed, and the manufacturer's safety requirements for a particular scaffold assemblies are required. Each scaffold and scaffold component used will support, without failure, its own weight and at least 4 times the maximum intended load applied or transmitted to it. Platform construction. Each scaffold plank will be installed so that the space between adjacent planks and the space between the platform and uprights is no more than 1 inch wide. If there is a need to adjust the spacing, it must be in the written scaffold plan. The front edge of all platforms will not be more than 14 inches from the face of the work, unless we have a guardrail or personal fall arrest system in place that meets regulations. Except for outrigger scaffolds, which is 3 inches from the face of the work, and plastering and lathing operations is 18 inches. Each platform on all working levels of scaffolds shall be fully planked or decked between the front uprights and the guardrail supports. There are specific rules for planking, so make sure these rules are followed to prevent injuries. Each end of a platform, unless cleated or otherwise restrained by hooks or other equivalent means, shall extend over the center line of its support at least 6 inches. These are just the basics to help you understand the complexity of scaffolds and basic safety requirements. Only knowledgeable and experienced competent persons can make sure the construction of scaffolds meets OSHA requirement, but anyone working on or near scaffolds should have an understanding of scaffolds and how they are constructed. Getting to the working platform is critical to the safety of anyone working on scaffolds. Anyone working on scaffolds should make sure the scaffold you're working on meets the following basic rules. Portable, hook-on, and attachable ladders will be positioned so as not to tip the scaffold. All stair systems and handrails will be surfaced to prevent injury from punctures or lacerations and to prevent snagging of their clothes. When scaffold platforms are more than 2 feet above or below a point of access, portable ladders, hook-on ladders, attachable ladders, stair towers, ramps, walkways, integral prefabricated scaffold access, or direct access from another scaffold, structure, personnel hoist, or similar surface shall be used. Remember that cross braces shall not be used as a means of access. While the planning, erection, fall protection, and access takes concentration and safe work practices, the most dangerous time can be when workers are concentrating on their work and are not particularly aware of the hazards of working from scaffolds. It is critical that workers who use scaffolds be trained, among other things, in the recognition of the hazards associated with the type of work. The competent person shall inspect all scaffolds and scaffold components for visible defects before each work shift and after any occurrence which could affect the scaffold's structural integrity. In addition, all users of scaffolds must know and understand the safety rules. These rules include: scaffolds and scaffold components will never be loaded in excess of their maximum intended loads or rated capacities. Debris must not be allowed to accumulate on platforms. Scaffolds and scaffold components shall be inspected for visible defects by a competent person before each work shift and after any occurrence which could affect the scaffold's structural integrity. Any part of a scaffold damaged or weakened such that its strength is less than that required by the scaffold standards shall be immediately repaired or replaced, braced to meet those provisions, or removed from service until repaired. Scaffolds shall not be moved horizontally while workers are on them, unless they have been designed by a registered professional engineer specifically for such movement or for mobile scaffolds. Scaffolds shall not be erected, used, dismantled, altered, or moved such that they or any conductive material handled on them might come closer to exposed and energized lines than allowed. Scaffolds shall be erected, moved, dismantled, or altered only under the supervision and direction of a competent person qualified in scaffold erection, moving, dismantling, or alteration. Such activities shall be performed only by experienced and trained employees selected for such work by the competent person. Employees shall be prohibited from working on scaffolds covered with snow, ice, or other slippery material, except as necessary for removal of such materials. Work on or from scaffolds is prohibited during storms or high winds, unless a competent person has determined that it is safe for employees to be on the scaffold and those employees are protected by a personal fall arrest system or windscreens. There have been deaths from working on scaffolds in high winds. Generally, you cannot use a ladder to extend the height of employees working on scaffolding. Be sure to understand the circumstances where ladders may be used, as in most cases, ladders are not used on scaffolds. Fall protection plans follow the OSHA requirements, which are different depending on the type of scaffold workers are using. Fall protection must be provided for any worker on a scaffold more than 10 feet above a lower level. Fall protection comes in several forms, such as guardrails and midrails, and personal harnesses properly secured to an acceptable anchorage point. In addition to wearing hard hats, each employee on a scaffold shall be provided with additional protection from falling hand tools, debris, and other small objects through the installation of tow boards, screens, or guardrail systems, or through the erection of debris nets, catch platforms, or canopy structures that contain or deflect the falling objects. Where there is a danger of tools, materials, or equipment falling from a scaffold and striking employees below, appropriate protection should be taken. Examples of this protection are: the area below the scaffold to which objects can fall shall be barricaded and employees shall not be permitted to enter the hazard area, or a tow board shall be erected along the edge of the platforms more than 10 feet above lower levels for a distance sufficient to protect employees below. We've only touched on the surface of scaffold regulations and standards. There are many other different types of scaffolds we haven't discussed. The important thing to remember is to make sure the scaffold is erected properly, will hold the load at its rated capacity, and workers must have fall protection if working at 10 feet or higher. OSHA regulations have been developed for one reason, and that's your safety. You have the right to a safe and healthful workplace and are not required to perform extremely hazardous or jobs that expose you to imminent danger. Scaffold safety is of extreme importance because there are many shortcuts that could lead to a fatality. Scaffolds are safe when the rules and regulations are followed and workers work and act safely on every job.
When working with aerial lifts, it's important to know and understand your equipment, the equipment's capabilities and limitations, and of course, the safety basics. Today's program will help you understand the safety basics of aerial lifts. It's your responsibility to make sure you've been properly trained and authorized by your company before you attempt to use this or any other type of equipment. Let's begin with identifying different types of aerial lift equipment. First, there's the slab model. It's usually small, has solid tires, and should only be used on concrete slab or asphalt. When using the slab model on asphalt, make sure the surface is sound enough to carry the weight of the vehicle. Some asphalt surfaces are uneven and can sink when heavy weight is applied. The rough terrain unit is normally used outside. It's designed to be used on construction sites or on dirt surfaces and has pneumatic or air pressurized tires. The gas-driven unit must be used in a large, well-ventilated area or used outside. The combustion engine gives off carbon monoxide. Therefore, good ventilation is extremely important. Propane-driven units can be operated indoors, but they also need well-ventilated areas in which to work. Diesel-driven units are normally used at refineries in areas where no sparks are allowed. This unit must be operated in a well-ventilated area. The battery-operated unit is designed for use in areas where there is poor ventilation, but you should keep in mind that batteries can discharge hydrogen gas, which can be flammable. Keep sparks or open flames away from the unit to prevent any mishaps. Always refer to your equipment manufacturer's recommendations regarding each piece of equipment you use. The manufacturer is the most knowledgeable about the safety features and precautions needed for each piece of equipment. Before operating any unit, a pre-start inspection and workplace inspection are required, so let's take a look at some of your responsibilities in regards to these two types of inspections. First, visually inspect all operating and emergency controls and safety devices. Next, give a functional test to all operating and emergency controls and safety devices. Check for proper operation of all personal protective equipment. Always wear your safety belt or harness and lanyard when on any aerial lift. When required, wear your gloves, eye goggles, face shield, hard hat, hard-toed safety shoes, and earplugs for noise protection. Inspect and check your air, hydraulic and fuel systems for leaks or damage. Also look for loose, ill-fitting, or missing parts. Check the tires and wheels for any damage, and make sure pneumatic tires have adequate tire pressure. Make sure all placards, warnings, control markings, and safety decals are on the unit and readable. When on the aerial lift, be sure you're completely enclosed by your guardrail and make sure it's properly bolted down and secured. If your unit is equipped with outriggers, check them for proper operation. Keep in mind that outriggers are for stabilizing the aerial lift, not for leveling the lift. The lift should be positioned on a surface that's level. The work platform should be free of any debris, tools, or clutter. Now you can move on to the workplace inspection. These inspections are necessary to determine whether or not there are any possible hazards in the work area. Always be aware. The workplace inspection begins before the aerial platform is used and continues throughout its use. Never operate an aerial lift without inspecting the work area first. Some hazards can be deadly. Let's end this program by discussing some basic shutdown procedures. When shutting down the aerial lift, there are certain procedures that must be followed. First, completely lower the platform. Open the emergency lowering valve. Turn the main power switch off. Remove the key from the control box and use means to protect against the use by unauthorized persons. If charging or checking batteries is necessary before, during, or after your shift, always wear eye protection and a face shield to prevent acid from getting into your eyes. Also, wear proper skin protection when handling batteries. If fueling is necessary before, during, or after a shift, the engine must be shut down and fueling must be done in a well-ventilated area free from open flames, sparks, or other hazards that may cause fire or explosion. If you're using a gasoline container to refuel, make sure the container is made of metal and the metal nozzle of the container is bonded to the fuel tank. This will reduce the potential for static electricity causing an explosion during gasoline refueling. We've discussed the safe operation of aerial lifts. It's up to you to learn and follow your company's exact policies and procedures. Aerial lifts are designed for safety and safe operations, but only if you follow the rules. Take the time for following these rules because they will not only affect you, but everyone working with you as well. Thank you.
The Occupational Safety and Health Administration Standard 1910.146D defines a confined space as any area which is large enough and so configured that an employee can bodily enter and perform work and has limited or restricted means for entry or exit. Is not designed for continuous human occupancy. Let's take a moment to review the most common confined space atmospheric hazards. Oxygen deficiency. In order to safely enter a confined space, OSHA requires that the space have a minimum of 19.5% oxygen. And at 8%, well, you're probably history. Not only is oxygen deficiency a concern, but in certain cases, an excess of oxygen can occur, creating a fire hazard. Flammable or explosive gases. Many confined spaces may contain flammable and/or explosive gases or vapors. Some flammable and/or combustible vapors are lighter than air and collect at the top of the space. Others, which may be heavier than air, settle at the bottom. Toxic gases and vapors. Toxic atmospheres are generally divided into two major classes: irritants and asphyxiants. Irritants are gases that in low concentration may only cause an irritation to your respiratory system, such as a sore throat or coughing. High concentrations can cause serious concerns or even death. Hydrogen sulfide, H2S, a common gas found in confined spaces, is an extremely toxic substance. Hydrogen sulfide is an insidious gas which smells like rotten eggs. Asphyxiants can cause death by displacing or pushing out air you need to breathe. The most common asphyxiants are carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and sulfur dioxide. The term non-permit required confined space is defined in 1910.146B as a confined space that does not contain, or with respect to atmospheric hazards, have the potential to cause any hazard capable of causing death or serious physical harm. The key is that these examples have sufficient natural or mechanical ventilation to prevent the accumulation of hazardous atmospheres. Permit-required spaces, on the other hand, defines a confined space that has or has the potential for one or more of the following hazards. Atmospheric hazard, such as oxygen deficiency, toxic or combustible environments. Engulfment hazard. An engulfment hazard is the potential for an employee to be trapped by liquids and/or flowable solids, such as powder or grain. Configuration hazard. A configuration hazard is represented by the shape of a space, such as a hopper, with inwardly sloping sides, and any other recognized hazard. Safe entry and work in confined spaces require employees to be trained in the risks, hazards, and procedures for working safely. No work should take place in a confined space, permit or non-permit, without careful pre-planning beforehand. The confined space entry supervisor or observer is the person directly in charge of the operation. They'll see to it that the atmosphere in the space is safe to enter, that ventilation is sufficient for the space, and that all necessary safety and emergency equipment is available for use. Confined space emergencies are no place for single-handed heroics. More than 50% of confined space deaths involve potential rescuers. If your organization uses employees to make a confined space rescue, each employee must be provided with and trained in rescue procedures, personal protective equipment, and equipment required to make a rescue. Work team and emergency crew members must be trained and hold a current first aid and CPR certificate. And no matter what,
No rescue may ever be attempted without the use of the proper respiratory protection, such as an SCBA, escape pack, ventilation, and mechanical hoist with full body harness.
In the trenching and excavation industries, there are plenty of opportunities for an accident or even a fatality. Prior to the new regulations, fatalities climbed to 100 deaths or more every year. An analysis reveals that the root cause is usually an absence of trench protection. That's right, workers take chances with their own lives just to save a little bit of time. The very first thing you should remember and follow is to never enter any trench or excavation 5 feet or more without trench protection. Trench protection means such as shoring, sloping, or other cave-in prevention methods. Trenches less than 5 feet can also present a significant hazard as well. The regulations require that a competent person be in charge of safety operations. Their word is law as it applies to working in or around trenching projects. A cubic foot of soil weighs more than 100 pounds, and a cubic yard weighs more than 3,000 pounds. If buried only under a few feet of soil, this can be sufficient pressure on your chest to prevent your lungs from expanding. There are basically 4 classifications for soil, which include solid rock, Class A, Class B, Class C is the most dangerous. Previously disturbed soil can be dangerous because the stability of the soil can be affected by excavating and digging. Previously disturbed soil is always less stable. Therefore, it's never classified as Class A soil. There are a lot of concerns relating to the wide range of underground utilities that can create hazards, such as electrical equipment and lines, water and sewer lines, gas and fuels, storm drains, telecom lines, and more. In most states, you can call 811 and they will provide the information for your location. Be aware of weather conditions, since rain, snow, freezing, thaws, and extreme temperature can have a major impact on the trenching project. Water in a trench is a major hazard, which degrades the stability of trench walls. Water must be controlled by using pumps, well points, and other methods of water control. Ladders must be placed every 25 feet of lateral travel in a trench for a quick exit. Compliance officers are trained to look for ladders as an indicator of safety issues on a trenching job. Be aware of the placement of spoil piles. At a minimum, spoil must never be placed less than 2 feet from the side of a 5-foot trench, and the deeper the trench, the further back the spoil pile needs to be. Many people don't fully understand that working in a trench can create a confined space. This can occur as a result of welding in a trench, leaking gas lines, and a number of other conditions. Discussion should be held about what to do in case of an emergency. Who will have what role? Who will call 911? Who will control the site? Who will direct emergency workers? And basically, who will do what when something goes wrong? In case of an emergency, never enter a cave-in to try to rescue a coworker. The trench has already demonstrated that the walls will fail. It's likely to do so again. Trenching operations is no place for shortcuts, so follow the safety regulations. The lives of you and your coworkers are in your hands.